And we had a meeting with him, and very complicated guy, very nice, but really complicated. I mean, was becoming a really intellectual kind of Superman. You know, questions, why do I fly? Why do I land? You know, things like that. And so, you know, although he was really physically and all that, he was in great shape. He was 30. I mean, but we didn't go with him. And
welcome to our Part 2 video covering Superman the movie from 1978. It is essential that you have watched Part 1, as in that video we covered the first half of Mario Puzo's script from Superman dating 1975. So if you start with this episode, you will have little context knowing what we are talking about. So let's continue from page 112 of Puzo's script. Now that Lois has collected the kryptonite meant to be used against Superman from the last video, Superman returns to his Fortress of Solitude and confers with his parents. He asks how he can deal with kryptonite, as he is sure Lois will try to test if Clark is Superman, and his father tells him to put lead fibers into his clothing, which he does. Then he shows up at Lois's apartment and tells her he's never been alone with a woman in an apartment before. Lois kisses him and says, "Pretty good, almost as good as a Superman kiss." Lois tells him she knows he's Superman, and to prove it, she brings him the kryptonite in the suitcase and tells him to open it if he's not Superman. Clark opens it, and to no surprise, it doesn't harm him, now that he's wearing a lead-lined suit coat, per his father's direction. With the kryptonite back in its case and put in another room, Clark removes his coat and they eat dinner together. And after dinner, Clark says he needs to head to the newsroom. And Lois says, "You dope, what the hell do you think I cooked dinner for you and was being so feminine? You're supposed to spend the night." Clark awkwardly states he is going to bow out, but she insists he wait for her. She returns to the room and Clark goes for his coat, but suddenly fumbles. Lois tricked him and has the kryptonite on her before he went to his coat, and she proves he's Superman. He then flies her to the Fortress of Solitude. When there, Superman tells her everything about his technology, his parents, and himself. The script plays out just like the second film, with a lot of similar dialogue, where Superman gives up his powers to be with Lois. He has 10 days to reverse the decision, according to his parents. After he goes into the chamber, Lois comes around to see Superman lying on a couch, and he looks weak. She asks him if he's changed. Superman is not sure, and Lois asks him to close his eyes. She then gut punches him and apologizes after it really hurt him. In bed later, Superman tells Lois that he didn't like being Superman because he was better than all humans and there was no challenge. He couldn't even play cards because of his X-ray vision. As Superman, he could never get sick, nor make love, or anything, and he tells her how terribly lonely it was. Lois's response to this is to tell Superman that she is going to get him drunk tonight with champagne so he can learn what a hangover is. Later that night, while Superman is sloshed, for a more comedic tone, Superman states he never needed to sleep, eat, or drink, but did it to blend in, and states he likes it now, actually. The script specifically states all this should be discussed like dopey drunks for humor. He also states that he was tired helping everyone. It will be nice to have a break, to which Lois would say in a drunken stupor, "You're right, you're not so wonderful anymore." Clark tries to explain, and then asks Lois if she understands, but she replies, "Not really, but now I believe you really are an ordinary earthling. You sound dumber." In the morning, Superman has a hangover, and Superman is delighted that it hurts, and he in fact is hungover. Then they take a car trip from the Fortress of Solitude to have dinner. Where was the car? Was it his old truck? Anyways, the mean truck driver appears and two of his pals are pissed Clark and Lois are in their booth. Clark stands up to them and gets his ass kicked. Then, when they leave after the cops are called, Lois tells Clark he was brave to fight three men without his powers, and he states that he also has to face the fact that now as a human, he is no longer smarter like he used to be. To which Lois and Clark both laugh over the event. Wait, are we in a comedy now? Then we cut to Clark, who is now on the news, and somehow Lois and Clark got back to civilization with ease in under 2 days of him becoming human. And we will go into that in a minute. Luther is watching them on television and tells his crew, after some more campy dialogue, that he intends to assassinate the Pope. We then cut to Lois, Clark, Jimmy Olsen, and Steve Lombard exiting a plane at the Vatican. Lois's purse is snatched by a kid, and Clark chases after him only to fail in the attempt. Then Lois and Clark check into a hotel room, and she asks him, 2 of your 10 days have gone by. What do you think? So, Superman became human, spent the night with Lois, drunk at the Fortress of Solitude, then went to a diner, got beat to hell, then got to Metropolis in time to do a news report, and then flew to the Vatican within 48 hours' time of becoming human.
It makes no damn sense.
Then Lombard humiliates Clark with another one of his football throwing bets that he did earlier in the script. The next day, they are covering the Vatican, and Clark and the camera crew notice 6 strange monks approaching the Pope. Clark races to protect the Pope while an explosion occurs. One of the monks pulls a gun, and Clark tackles him from firing at the Pope. The gun misses the Pope, and guards appear everywhere. Clark struggles with the man who is mortally wounded, and while Clark demands to know why he would do such a thing, Luther's henchman says that what he did is nothing, foreshadowing that something bigger is coming. On the plane flight home, Jimmy is overjoyed he got everything on camera, while Lois reminds Clark he has 5 days left to change his mind. Superman says being super was not happy. Then Clark and his team are given an assignment to a military base where a new H-bomb is being made, and of course Lex Luthor goes there too. And if you know anything about the military and secret installations, the press isn't usually invited there to learn about goings-on. Anyways, in this script, they teach the press what they are doing exactly with their nuclear experiments, and then they go to lunch. This is interrupted when Lex meddles with a nuclear reactor, and men in radiation suits are involved in the aftermath. Kent suffers severe radiation due to this event, so much so that he is dressed like a mummy, and the doctors state he's going to die. Kent whispers to Lois to get him to the Fortress of Solitude. The next scene has Clark's team disguised as doctors and smuggling Clark from the hospital to an airplane, where Olsen and Lombard easily fly the plane to the Fortress of Solitude and land with no problems. When they arrive, Olsen states, "I can't believe Clark Kent is Superman." The character of Lombard, one note as always, states, "No wonder the son of a bitch always beat me." They put Superman in the chamber, and with ease he is turned back into his normal, indestructible self. Later, Superman serves them a drink in thanks, and Superman says he'll never forget what they did, but they will. They look perplexed, and everyone drinks, although Lois fakes drinking suspicious. Olsen and Lombard pass out, while Lois fakes passing out, and when they wake up, they all forget what happened after the army base. Lois knows. She just played ignorant for Superman's sake. When he leaves the room, she enters the chamber and is surrounded by blue fog. She then dreams of being a superwoman fighting a man and then saying cringy lines like, "Think you can handle me?" after Superman says, "Your place or mine." She then wakes up on a couch where Superman says, "I'm sorry, Lois. The machine doesn't work on Earthlings in any way." To which she says, "Darn you, Superman. Why couldn't you wait just one more minute?" Then Superman convinces Lois to drink the magical champagne that will make her forget. And she drinks and passes out. Then we have a sharp cut to a newspaper headline that says "Nuclear Bomb Stolen," and the news team is on television covering the event and the miraculous recovery of Clark Kent, who was mistakenly pronounced in lethal condition by the military. In Luthor's lair, he is crafting the final thoughts on his letter of demands to the President of the United States, in which he wants $100 million in gold bullion, a pardon for all past crimes, and a $10 million advertising credit for television for reasons, or he will detonate his hidden bomb. It is completely ludicrous. So then the president goes on television after getting the demands and says no. And then Luthor plans to detonate his hidden atom bomb in an hour. His henchmen ask if he's really going to do it, and then Superman busts through the door to his lair. Luthor tells Superman that the bomb is circling on an automated plane above Metropolis and will crash in 15 minutes, and it can't be reversed. Then Superman races off, grabs the plane, and carries it off into space, and he continues far away from Earth until releasing it. It explodes, and unbeknownst to Superman, the criminals from the Phantom Zone are released. When Superman returns to Earth, he is a hero decorated by the president, and Lois accepts an award on his behalf. But Superman is antsy. He feels like something is wrong and talks to his father extensively about the Phantom Zone criminals. He feels like they escaped, and his fears are confirmed as they approach Earth. Superman puts on his lead-lined clothing and grabs the suitcase with the kryptonite, flying out of the Fortress of Solitude. The 4 Phantom Zone criminals have left a trail of destruction where they touched down, killing many, destroying homes and cars. They are on a highway when Superman lands to face them. One of the criminals, Jax demands Superman join them, and that they could see everything, and knows who he is. Superman then says, "There's no way out. I have to kill the 4 of you." Then we have a fight, and it ends up in Metropolis, where Jax rips off the belt of kryptonite and throws it far away as both he and Superman crash into a building, thus making it collapse on them. Superman is thrown through a high-rise, and the streets turn into a mess as Superman's and villains crash to the ground. Wounded, Superman flees, and he is chased by the villains into Lex Luthor's lair, complete with mazes and hologram emitters that Luthor uses to mask his movements when he's in danger. Superman uses the holograms to emit copies of himself to trick the villains while he collapses. In another part of the maze, Superman wakes up on a couch where Luthor and some of his henchmen have administered first aid to the Cape Crusader. He asks why Luthor helped him, and he says, "Common sense. I can do business with you because you're honest, and there is only one of you." Superman asks for help, and Luthor asks what he gets out of it. Superman says amnesty. Luthor goes through his mostly ruined lair of mazes where the supervillains are searching for Superman, and when he finds them, he tells them Superman is setting a trap for them, and he wants to help them if they will let him join them. He tells them Superman has a Fortress of Solitude, and they need to carry him there. Jax lifts up Luthor, and they fly there. The Kryptonians bang on the fortress walls trying to get in, and Luthor offers to help them, saying he understands human psychology better than them, and since Superman has lived on Earth, he has adapted some of that psychology. Luthor yells to Superman inside that even though Superman is safe in the fortress, the villains can conquer the world while he remains trapped in his own phantom zone inside the fortress. He says they need to agree to splitting up the Earth in 5 parts. 4 parts for the villains, and 1 for Superman. He asks Superman to let them in so they can hash out a deal, to which Zod, who is not really the leader in this version, asks if Luthor is kidding, to which another villain says, "It's just Earthling talk. It's called détente." Superman opens the door and asks for them to agree that no hostile actions will occur. They agree, and when they get inside, they try to go for Superman, but he flees to the chamber room. Superman starts the process and flies into the chamber. The others outside the chamber turn human. The 4 villains don't know what happened, and when Superman exits, they try to hit Superman, but it has no effect. They are then incapacitated, and he smashes the chamber machine so it never can be used again. Then we cut to Superman's den, where Luthor is serving the villains drinks, while Superman tells them they are now going to be Earthlings forever. Jax states that Superman is now responsible for their safety, while the villain Professor Vaycox says, "Why not make us good? Then we can get along." Superman states he's giving them a fresh start, and as they drink the liquid, he tells them they are going to forget everything about who they are and will fall asleep. When they wake, they will have a new chance at a new life. After they all fall asleep, Superman tells Luthor he should drink. But Lex says he is what he is, and no drink will change that. Superman smiles, tells him to drink, and Lex asks him if there is drug in the drink. Superman says, no, after all, you did save the world. Then the credits roll, but there is an end credits scene where Clark is on television summing up the world problems between nations preparing to fight, environmental problems, while Lois watches. Clark states that no Superman can save us from these problems, that we have to save ourselves. When Puzo finished his second draft in November 1975, he had a job done and walked away from the project. So the Salkinds brought in more writers, like Robert Benton from Bonnie and Clyde, and the writing team Leslie and David Newman. These screenwriters revered Superman.
You know, a couple of friends said, why would you want to do that? A comic book, blah, blah, blah. And David's answer was, Superman is our King Arthur. This is our legend.
So the work would begin to rewrite Puzo's script, and this would go on for some time, while the producers rescheduled the film's start date and continued searching for talent. The Robert Benton, Leslie, and David Newman script would evolve and not be finished till July 1976. In early 1975, Americans wondered why Europeans would be making Superman rather than the country that it came from. Warner Brothers had little faith in the project. Indeed, the head of the production thought making Superman was a joke, while DC hoped that it would help bring Superman more into the 70s culture, and they were very protective of their character, following up on everything. The Salkinds knew there were a lot of eyes on them, and the media was ready to pounce or praise any move they made. Now, the structure of the Alexander and Ilya relationship as a producing team was simple. Alexander was in the background, controlling the money and pulling every string like a banker. His word was law, period, and he yelled a lot. He could do this because no one questioned that it was he who made whatever movie he worked on happen. Ilya was the creative one and would be a liaison between his father and the team making the movie, with Pierre everywhere else. So it's easy to understand why Alexander Salkind's instinct matched both Warner Brothers and DC Comics, which was named National Periodical Publications at the time. He wanted a big star to play Superman, regardless if he looked like the 30-something-year-old, as he considered makeup and hair color could make whoever look like Superman in his eyes. So the first name Alexander threw out there was Robert Redford. Though Spengler and Ilya Salkind were not 100% on board with the idea of Redford playing Superman, he was an approved casting choice that was allowed per the rights negotiations. The studio had a list of pretty much every star they approved to play Superman, and a ton of actors should have never been on that list. Some examples were Al Pacino, Clint Eastwood, Dustin Hoffman, James Caan, Steve McQueen, and even Cassius Clay, a.k.a. Muhammad Ali, to play Superman. And all these people were considered. Many were pursued, and we will cover some of them later. A big name meant attention, and that was what the senior Salkind focused on right out of the gate to get some buzz for the production. Redford turned down the part, even though he was offered a ton of money. After Redford passed, this was when Alexander Salkind reacted quickly, fearing big names would not take his movie seriously. And that's when he hired Mario Puzo to write the script for $600,000 to gain better respectability. After Puzo was on, the next name Alexander wanted was Paul Newman. Newman wasn't sold, even though he was offered millions to take either Jor-El or Luthor, but he passed on them too and walked away. Meanwhile, Ilya Salkind was looking for directors. One of the directors he eyed was Steven Spielberg, who was currently working on Jaws. However, Alexander was cautious and told his son to wait until Spielberg's Fish movie came out. When it did, they tried to nab him, but it was too late. He was already picked up by Columbia and was so huge he could do any project he wanted. They even talked with George Lucas, but he was too busy with Star Wars. Other great directors looked at was William Friedkin, Peter Yates, John Gilliman, Sam Peckinpah, until Ilya thought of Goldfinger director Guy Hamilton and approached him. Hamilton was interested, and now that he was on board, Salkind was panicking that no matter how huge the money offers were, big actors picked so far passed, and this inevitably could make the production look unappealing to audiences and talent. Ilya Salkind's response was simple.
After Newman said no, then I said to my father, look, let's forget Superman. We're never going to get a Superman that really works at this point. I said, well, let's get a huge star for Jor-El and a huge star for Lex Luthor.
At around this time, Dustin Hoffman was being courted for Lex Luthor, and he was interested, but in time, of course, he wouldn't work out either. But then someone reached out to Ilya saying he knew Marlon Brando, and they could help them procure him. Brando was currently involved with Apocalypse Now. Brando wanted over $2 million and a large percentage of ticket sales. In the end, he would be paid $3.7 million for his role, and he would get profits from the film as well. It was the biggest paid actor paycheck in history at that time. It was a major deal, and it was covered everywhere. With the press talking about Superman, the publicity engine for the film went into high gear, noting that with such a serious actor and Puzo writing, this Superman was going to be different. Immediately after Marlon Brando signed, Warner Brothers changed their attitude and said they wanted the American rights to the film. Within weeks, Gene Hackman signed to be Lex Luthor in 2 films for $2 million. Not wanting to lose that momentum, Alexander Salkind, ever the promoter, put 2-page ads for the film showing their stars and the logo for the film to entice talent, and he even went so far to put planes in the sky pushing the film as well. With things moving forward, some sets began construction, and Alexander Salkind wanted the bulk of the film to be filmed in Cinecittà, Rome, which was a huge studio. While this was going on, the search for Superman continued, and there were so many looked at for the part. To go into all of them would take a whole video, and we will cover many, but it'll be short and sweet. Burt Reynolds was offered the part but turned it down. Sylvester Stallone lobbied for the part and really wanted it bad, but he was considered too Italian. Arnold Schwarzenegger also wanted the part but was ignored. Warren Beatty passed on the part as well. Clint Eastwood was approached, but he was too busy. Both Charles Bronson and Steve McQueen were thought about, but Bronson was considered too earthy and McQueen too heavy. Others considered were John Voight, James Caan, Ryan O'Neal, Sam Elliott, John Beck, Jeff Bridges, Jan Michael Vincent, Perry King, Chris Christopherson, and Lyle Wagner. Then, in July 1976, Ilya Salkind saw an Olympic gold medalist who caught his attention.
And we tested him. Actually, we were based in Rome at the beginning, and we tested him there, and he was very good, but he looked too young. He really looked 22, 20, 23, which he actually was. And he had a very young way of expressing, and so that was really the problem.
Jenner came in for a screen test, but was not offered the part, being labeled not an actor by those tied to the film. According to The Making of the Superman Movie by David Michael Petrou, while this was going on, the final screenplay by Robert Benton and David Leslie Newman was completed, and it was an improvement over Puzo's script, and we will go into this version later. Things seemed to move even further when Patrick Wayne was cast as Superman, but that hope didn't last long, because he had to drop out of the film when his father, John Wayne, was diagnosed with stomach cancer, and he left to help him. Keeping things moving, the time came for the production to move to Rome, and everything turned into a mess quickly. A legal issue erupted. In the film, The Last Tango in Paris, Marlon Brando was depicted raping a woman in that movie, and it was considered lewd by Italy. In January 1976, a higher appellate court confirmed a conviction against the filmmakers, stripping Bernardo Bertolucci of his civil rights for 5 years and ordered the destruction of the negatives. There was also a warrant out for Marlon because of his scene in that film as well. Marlon didn't want to go anywhere near Italy because of this, and this wouldn't have been a problem except that Guy Hamilton had just entered a status of non-resident with the United Kingdom. This made Hamilton a tax exile. But the production had to move to Pinewood Studios in England, not only because the pound was doing well there and there was availability, but if the production moved to America, it would be very costly. So, either Hamilton had to go or Brando had to go.
And of course, Marlon or Guy. And so, of course, logically, we went with Marlon.
Hamilton demanded he be paid, though, as they had a contract, and that was more money added to the budget of the film. Ilya's wife suggested Richard Donner, who was still riding high on the success of The Omen. It was December 1976 when Richard Donner was called on the telephone while he was sitting on the toilet. On the other end, Alexander Salkind, who he didn't know, wanted him to make his 2 Superman films for $1 million.
And I'd written it down on a little tiny card that was in the bathroom. That card today is still, it's the most important card of my life.
Before he said yes, Donner did his due diligence, and he reached out to Richard Lester, who was the last director who worked with the Salkinds, to get an idea of what they were like to work for. Lester was more a warning than a cheerleader. Don't work for them. I was told not to work for them when I did Musketeers, and I did it anyway. Now I'm telling you not to do it, but you'll probably do it and end up telling the next guy. The reason he said this was because Lester, like most of the cast and crew of the recent Musketeer films, were in legal arguments with the Salkinds about not being paid what they were owed fairly for 2 films. In a nutshell, Donner discovered that Alexander Salkind was a penny-pinching banker type, and Pierre Spengler was analogous to an attack dog for Alexander Salkind. It was made clear that if Donner took the job, he should be paid in full up front when he signed the dotted line, and Donner did just that. Unfortunately, Marlon Brando should have been told these things, because after Superman released, he would end up suing the Salkinds for not being paid in full for his performance per their agreement, continuing the trend. So right up front, Donner knew that he would have issues. Then Donner received the newest version of the script, and this would determine if he took the project. And we will go over this script at the start of our 3rd video. And we will also finally go over the casting for Superman. And no, it will not be Babu from the South Indian version of Superman. We will see you next time. If you like what you see here, click like and subscribe. Super thanks helps, but so does sharing.